Maya Chen had always been the girl who blended into the background. At 17, she stood barely 5 feet tall, with thick-rimmed glasses that constantly slipped down her nose and an oversized backpack that seemed to swallow her petite frame. Walking through the hallways of Lincoln High School, she moved like a shadow, keeping her head down and her earbuds in, hoping to avoid the attention that never seemed to bring anything good. The archery range at Lincoln High was tucked away behind the main gymnasium, a forgotten corner of the school that most students never bothered to visit. It was exactly the kind of place Maya gravitated toward, quiet, overlooked, and peaceful. She had discovered it by accident 3 months earlier while trying to find a shortcut to avoid the crowded cafeteria during lunch. The moment she saw the targets lined up against the back wall, something inside her stirred with curiosity. Coach Henderson, a weathered man in his 60s with kind eyes and calloused hands, had been running the archery program for nearly 30 years. He was used to students wandering in, trying archery for a week or two before losing interest and moving on to more popular sports. When Maya first approached him, nervously adjusting her glasses and asking if she could try shooting, he assumed she would follow the same pattern. "Sure, kid," he had said, handing her a beginner's bow. "Let's see what you can do." What happened next surprised them both. Maya's first arrow sailed wide, missing the target entirely and embedding itself in the wooden fence behind. Her second shot was better, catching the outer edge of the target. But, by her fifth arrow, something clicked. Her stance naturally adjusted, her breathing steadied, and her focus narrowed to a pinpoint. The arrow struck the yellow center with a satisfying thud. Coach Henderson raised his eyebrows but said nothing. Beginner's luck was common enough. But, as the weeks passed and Maya returned every day during lunch, her improvement was undeniable. She absorbed his instructions like a sponge, practicing her form with religious dedication. Within a month, she was consistently hitting the inner rings. Within 2 months, she was outperforming students who had been in the program for years. "You've got something special, Maya," Coach Henderson told her one afternoon as they collected arrows from the target. "Natural talent like this doesn't come around often." Maya blushed, and used to compliments about her abilities. At home, she was the quiet daughter of immigrant parents who worked double shifts to make ends meet. Her father drove a taxi 16 hours a day, and her mother cleaned office buildings at night. They were proud of her good grades, but they had little time or energy to celebrate her small victories. Archery became her secret sanctuary, a place where she could excel without pressure or expectation. The other students in the archery program were a small, tight-knit group. There was Jake, a senior who had been shooting since middle school and considered himself the unofficial leader of the team. Sarah and Marcus, both juniors who treated archery more as a social activity than a serious sport. And then, there was Derek, the star athlete who had joined archery as an easy credit, assuming it would require minimal effort. Derek Martinez was everything Maya was not. Tall, confident, and popular, he was the captain of the basketball team and had a scholarship to State University already lined up. When he strutted into the archery range for the first time, he made it clear that he was doing everyone a favor by being there. "How hard can it be to shoot arrows at a big target?" he had laughed, flexing his muscled arms. "I'll probably break some records." Coach Henderson had simply smiled and handed him a bow. Derek's first session was humbling. His arrows flew everywhere except where he intended, and his cocky demeanor quickly turned to frustration. But Derek was nothing if not competitive, and he threw himself into improving with the same intensity he brought to basketball. Maya watched all of this unfold from her quiet corner of the range. She had learned to tune out Derek's boastful comments and Jake's condescending advice. She focused on her own shooting, steadily improving while the others seemed to plateau. Her scores were consistently higher than anyone else's, but she never bragged or drew attention to herself. The turning point came on a crisp October afternoon when Principal Walsh announced that Lincoln High would be hosting the Regional Youth Archery Championship. Schools from across the state would send their best shooters to compete for individual and team honors. The winning archer would receive a full scholarship to the archery program at Preston College, one of the most prestigious schools in the country. The news sent ripples of excitement through the small archery program. Jake immediately began talking strategy, assuming he would be the team captain. Derek saw it as another chance to prove his athletic superiority. Sarah and Marcus were just excited about the attention the team would finally receive. Maya felt her stomach flutter with a mixture of excitement and terror. This was the kind of opportunity she had only dreamed about. A scholarship to Preston College could change her entire future, lifting her family out of their financial struggles and opening doors she never thought possible. But the thought of competing in front of hundreds of people made her hands shake. Coach Henderson called a team meeting the next day to discuss the competition. The range felt different with all 6 members of the program gathered together, the usual casual atmosphere replaced by nervous energy. "All right, everyone," Coach Henderson began, leaning against the equipment rack. "The regional championship is in 6 weeks. Each school can enter up to 4 archers in the individual competition, and we'll also compete as a team. I'll be selecting our representatives based on performance over the next month." Derek immediately spoke up. "Coach, you know I should be our number one. I've been working harder than anyone, and I've got the competitive experience from basketball." Jake nodded in agreement. "Derek's right. Plus, I've been in the program the longest. We should be the anchors of the team." Maya remained silent, her eyes fixed on her hands folded in her lap. She knew her scores were higher than both Derek's and Jake's, but speaking up felt impossible. Throughout her life, she had learned that staying quiet and invisible was safer than risking confrontation or disappointment. "We'll see how everyone performs," Coach Henderson said diplomatically. "The best shooters will represent our school, regardless of seniority or other sports experience." Over the following weeks, the practice sessions became more intense. Derek trained with obsessive determination, staying after school for extra practice and watching instructional videos online. Jake worked on refining his technique, trying to find the consistency that had eluded him. Sarah and Marcus practiced more seriously than they ever had before. Maya simply continued doing what she had always done. She arrived at lunch, shot her arrows with quiet precision, and packed up before anyone could engage her in conversation. But her scores continued to climb. She was now hitting bullseyes with remarkable consistency, and her groupings were tighter than anyone else's on the team. Coach Henderson noticed, of course. During one particularly impressive session, he pulled Maya aside. "You realize you're shooting better than anyone I've coached in 30 years, right?" he said quietly. Maya looked up at him with surprise. "Really? Really? Your natural form is textbook perfect, and your mental game is stronger than shooters with decades of experience. You have a real chance to win this whole thing." The words sent a thrill through Maya, but also a wave of anxiety. Winning meant being in the spotlight, meant people looking at her and expecting things from her. It meant risking failure in front of everyone who knew her. "I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of pressure," she admitted. Coach Henderson smiled kindly. "The best archers I've known were never the loudest or most confident. They were the ones who understood that archery is about inner strength and focus. You've got both of those in abundance." As the weeks passed, the divide between Maya's quiet excellence and her teammates' flashy confidence became more apparent. During one practice session, Derek was showing off for a group of basketball players who had stopped by to watch. He drew his bow with exaggerated flair, talking loudly about his technique. "It's all about the follow-through," he announced. "You've got to commit fully to every shot." His arrow sailed high, missing the target completely. The basketball players laughed, and Derek's face reddened with embarrassment. Meanwhile, Maya stood at the far end of the line, methodically shooting arrow after arrow into the center of her target. She wasn't trying to show off or prove anything to anyone. She was simply doing what felt natural, what brought her peace and satisfaction. Jake noticed her consistency and felt a growing resentment. He had been in the program longer than anyone, had put in more time and effort, yet this quiet girl was making it look effortless. During one session, he made a snide comment loud enough for everyone to hear. "Some people just get lucky, I guess. But luck doesn't hold up under pressure." Maya heard him but said nothing. She had faced doubt and dismissal her entire life. Her elementary school teachers had underestimated her because English wasn't her first language. Her middle school classmates had ignored her because she wasn't social or outgoing. She had learned to let her actions speak for themselves. The week before the regional championship, Coach Henderson announced the team roster. Maya's name was at the top of the list. Derek's face went pale. "There has to be a mistake," he said. "I'm the captain of the basketball team. I have leadership experience. The roster is based purely on scoring averages over the past month," Coach Henderson explained. "Maya has the highest scores, followed by Derek, Jake, and Sarah." The room fell silent. Maya felt every eye on her, and she wanted nothing more than to disappear. She had never asked to be the center of attention, had never wanted to take anyone's spot or create conflict. "This is ridiculous," Derek muttered. "When the pressure hits, we'll see who really has what it takes." That afternoon, Maya walked home alone, her mind churning with doubt. Maybe Derek was right. Maybe her success in practice wouldn't translate to a real competition. Maybe she was fooling herself into thinking she belonged on the same stage as experienced competitive archers from across the state. At home, she found her parents in the kitchen, sharing a quiet dinner after their long work shifts. She wanted to tell them about the competition, about the scholarship opportunity, about her fears and hopes. But they looked so tired, so worn down by the daily struggle to provide for their family. She didn't want to add to their burdens with her problems. "How was school today, Maya?" her mother asked in Mandarin. "Good, Mom." "Just normal," Maya replied, taking her usual seat at the small kitchen table. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the girl she had become over the past few months. The archery range had given her something she had never had before, a place where she excelled, where her quiet nature was an asset rather than a liability. But, now that sanctuary was about to be invaded by crowds, judges, and expectations. She thought about Coach Henderson's words, about inner strength and focus. She thought about her parents, working so hard to give her opportunities they had never had. She thought about the scholarship to Preston College, and how it could change not just her future, but her family's future. Slowly, quietly, Maya made a decision. She would compete. She would face the pressure and the doubt and the attention. She would show everyone, including herself, what the quiet girl in the corner was truly capable of. The stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge everything her teammates thought they knew about strength, skill, and what it meant to be a champion. The next morning, Maya walked into school with a new sense of purpose. She had spent her entire life being underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed. But archery had taught her something valuable about herself, that beneath her quiet exterior lay a core of steel, a precision and focus that couldn't be shaken by doubts or derision. In just 1 week, she would have the chance to prove that the girl everyone had counted out was actually the one they should have been watching all along. The regional championship would test more than just her archery skills, it would test her courage, her resilience, and her belief in herself. Maya Chen was ready for that test. The morning of the Regional Youth Archery Championship dawned gray and overcast, with a biting wind that seemed to cut right through the autumn air. Maya woke before her alarm, her stomach churning with a mixture of excitement and terror. She had barely slept, spending most of the night replaying Coach Henderson's techniques in her mind and trying to calm her racing thoughts. The gymnasium at Lincoln High had been transformed overnight. What was usually a quiet, overlooked space now buzzed with activity. Tournament officials hung banners and set up registration tables while volunteers arranged rows of chairs for spectators. The archery range had been expanded to accommodate 12 shooting lanes, each marked with precise measurements and official tournament targets. Maya arrived early, carrying her equipment bag with hands that trembled slightly despite her efforts to stay calm. The sight that greeted her was overwhelming. Buses from rival schools were already pulling into the parking lot, disgorging confident-looking archers with expensive equipment and matching team uniforms. These weren't recreational shooters like most of Lincoln High's team, these were serious competitors who lived and breathed archery. Coach Henderson found Maya standing frozen near the entrance, watching the other teams with wide eyes behind her glasses. "Second thoughts?" he asked gently. Maya shook her head, though her voice came out smaller than she intended. they all look so professional. Look at their equipment, their uniforms. Some of them have coaches and assistants. Equipment doesn't shoot arrows, Maya. People do. Coach Henderson placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You've outshot every archer I've trained in 3 decades. Trust your preparation, trust your instincts. The other Lincoln High team members arrived shortly after, their reactions to the competition varying dramatically. Derek swaggered in wearing his leather jacket, clearly trying to project confidence, but Maya noticed how his eyes lingered on the opposing team's setups with barely concealed nervousness. Jake arrived with his parents, who had driven down from 2 hours away specifically to watch him compete. Sarah bounced with nervous energy, chattering excitedly about finally being in a real tournament. The registration process was a blur of paperwork, equipment inspections, and safety briefings. Maya felt increasingly small among the crowd of competitors, many of whom seemed to know each other from previous tournaments. She overheard conversations about regional rankings, sponsorship deals, and college recruitment, a world she had never imagined existed. During the practice session, Maya found herself on the shooting line next to Amanda Pierce, a senior from Riverside Academy who had won the state championship the previous year. Amanda's equipment gleamed under the gymnasium lights, a high-end compound bow with precision sights and stabilizers that probably cost more than Maya's family spent on groceries in 6 months. First big tournament? Amanda asked, noticing Maya's basic equipment and obvious nerves. Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. Amanda smiled, but it wasn't entirely kind. Don't worry. Everyone gets nervous their first time. The pressure here is nothing like shooting in your school's little practice sessions. Maya's practice arrows flew true, clustering tightly in the center of her target. Amanda noticed, and her expression shifted from condescending sympathy to sharp interest. When Maya's final practice arrow split one of her previous arrows down the middle, something called a Robin Hood shot that even experienced archers rarely achieved, conversations around the range began to quiet. Derek, shooting 2 lanes down, had watched Maya's practice session with growing anxiety. His own arrows were scattered across the target face, his form deteriorating with each shot as tension crept into his muscles. The confident swagger he had displayed all morning was beginning to crack. She's just lucky, he muttered to Jake. Practice and competition are completely different animals. When the real pressure hits, we'll see what she's really made of. But Jake wasn't so sure anymore. He had been watching Maya shoot for months, and her consistency was undeniable. Moreover, she seemed to thrive under the quiet pressure of focused shooting. While Derek's technique fell apart when he got frustrated, and his own shots became erratic when he overthought them, Maya appeared to enter a zone of calm concentration that external factors couldn't penetrate. The tournament format was a traditional target round. Each archer would shoot 72 arrows at targets placed 70 meters away. The competition would be held in groups of 6, with archers rotating through the shooting line in waves. Maya found herself scheduled in the 3rd group, which meant she would have to wait and watch 2 full rounds before her chance to compete. As the first group of archers took their positions, the gymnasium filled with spectators. Parents, teammates, and curious students filled the bleachers, creating a low hum of conversation punctuated by the sharp crack of arrows striking targets. Maya had never shot in front of more than a handful of people, and the sight of hundreds of eyes potentially watching her every move made her feel lightheaded. The first group included several obviously experienced competitors. Their form was textbook perfect, their equipment pristine, their shots methodical and precise. Maya watched them with growing intimidation, noting how they seemed completely unbothered by the crowd, the officials walking behind them, or the pressure of competition. Amanda Pierce was in the 2nd group, and Maya watched her with particular attention. Amanda's shooting was flawless, smooth draw, consistent anchor point, perfect follow-through. Her arrows grouped tightly in the center of the target, and, after each end of 6 arrows, she would nod with satisfaction before walking to retrieve them. Look at her scores, Sarah whispered to Maya, pointing at the electronic scoreboard. She's shooting almost perfect rounds. Maya's confidence, already shaky, took another hit. Amanda was shooting scores that Maya had achieved only a handful of times in practice, and she was making it look effortless. When Amanda finished her 72 arrows with a nearly perfect score, the gymnasium erupted in applause. The favorite to win, an official announced over the public address system, shooting for Riverside Academy, Amanda Pierce with a score of 689 out of a possible 720. Derek clapped along with everyone else, but his expression was grim. Even his best practice sessions had never approached that level of scoring. Jake looked equally deflated. The scholarship to Preston College suddenly seemed impossibly out of reach. Maya felt her hands begin to shake. The rational part of her mind knew that she had shot scores in practice that would have matched or beaten Amanda's performance, but the pressure of the moment was unlike anything she had ever experienced. The crowd noise, the formal announcements, the knowledge that college scouts were in the audience taking notes, it all combined to create a weight of expectation that threatened to crush her usual calm. Coach Henderson appeared beside her just as her group was called to the line. "Remember what we talked about," he said quietly. "Block out everything except you, your bow, and the target. The same fundamentals that worked in practice will work here." Maya nodded, but her throat felt tight. She picked up her equipment bag with trembling hands and walked toward the shooting line, feeling like she was approaching her execution rather than her moment of opportunity. The other archers in her group were an intimidating collection of talent. Besides herself, there was Marcus Webb from Central High, a junior who had placed third in state the previous year. Jennifer Santos from Valley Prep, whose form was so technically perfect it looked like something from an instructional video. David Kim from North Academy, who shot with the relaxed confidence of someone who had been competing since elementary school. And then, there was Robert Tank Morrison from West High, a massive senior whose nickname came from both his size and his aggressive shooting style. Tank had a way of dominating competitions through sheer intimidation, talking loudly about his scores and making comments clearly designed to rattle his competitors. Well, Tank said as Maya took her position at lane 4. "Lincoln High brought their secret weapon, I see. What's your story, little girl? First time shooting with the big kids?" Maya felt her face burn with embarrassment, but she kept her eyes focused on her equipment setup. She had learned long ago that engaging with bullies only encouraged them, and Tank was clearly trying to get under her skin. "Cat got your tongue?" Tank continued, loud enough for spectators to hear. "Or maybe you're just realizing you're in over your head." Jennifer Santos shot Tank a disapproving look. "Leave her alone, Tank. Let's just shoot." But Tank wasn't finished. "I'm just saying, this is the regional championship, not some middle school PE class. Hope she doesn't embarrass her school too badly." Maya's hands stopped shaking. Something about Tank's crude attempt at intimidation triggered a familiar feeling, the quiet determination that had carried her through years of being underestimated and overlooked. She thought about her parents, working their exhausting jobs to provide for her. She thought about Coach Henderson's faith in her abilities. She thought about the scholarship to Preston College that could change everything. The tournament official stepped forward. "Archers to the line. Prepare for the first end of 6 arrows." Maya knocked her first arrow and took her stance. The familiar weight of the bow in her hand, the feel of the string against her fingertips, the sight of the target 70 meters away, suddenly, everything else faded into background noise. The crowd, the pressure, Tank's mocking comments, even her own fears became distant and irrelevant. The official raised his whistle. "Begin shooting." Maya drew her bow with the same smooth motion she had practiced thousands of times. The sight picture aligned perfectly, her breathing steadied, and she released with the gentle surprise that marked a perfect shot. The arrow flew in a graceful arc and struck dead center in the target's gold ring. Tank, shooting beside her, glanced over with surprise. His own first arrow had caught the edge of the scoring area, a decent but unspectacular start. Maya's second arrow followed the same perfect trajectory, striking just millimeters from her first. The third arrow grouped tightly with the others. By the time she had shot all 6 arrows in her first end, they were clustered in a group smaller than her fist, all within the highest scoring area of the target. The official called for the archers to collect their arrows and report their scores. Maya walked to her target in a daze, hardly believing what she was seeing. Her 6 arrows formed the tightest group she had ever shot under pressure, and her score for the first end was perfect. 60 points, she called back to the scoring table, her voice stronger than she felt. Tank's score was 48, still competitive, but clearly below Maya's level. He stared at her target with undisguised shock. Lucky end, he muttered, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. The second end went even better for Maya. She seemed to settle into a rhythm, each shot feeling more natural and controlled than the last. Her arrows continued to cluster tightly in the center of the target, and her scores remained consistently high. Meanwhile, the pressure appeared to be affecting her competitors differently. Marcus Webb, despite his experience, was shooting well below his usual standards. Jennifer Santos maintained good form but couldn't achieve the pinpoint accuracy needed for truly elite scores. David Kim was solid but unspectacular. Tank, however, was beginning to unravel. His aggressive personality, which he had always used to intimidate opponents, was working against him now. Each of Maya's perfect shots seemed to rattle him further, and his own scores began to decline as frustration crept into his technique. By the halfway point of the competition, the gymnasium was buzzing with excitement. Word had spread about the unknown girl from Lincoln High who was shooting perfect or near-perfect ends with remarkable consistency. Even some of the other competitors had stopped to watch when Maya's group took the line. Amanda Pierce, who had finished her round and was watching from the sidelines, studied Maya with professional interest. The condescending sympathy she had shown during practice had been replaced by genuine respect and, perhaps, a touch of concern. Maya was matching her own pace shot for shot, and showing no signs of pressure affecting her performance. Coach Henderson watched from the sideline with pride and amazement. In 30 years of coaching archery, he had never seen a shooter handle pressure quite like Maya was handling it. Rather than being overwhelmed by the attention and stakes, she seemed to be drawing strength from them. Each shot was deliberate, controlled, and precise. Derek and Jake watched from the team's seating area with complicated emotions. They were proud to be Maya's teammates and genuinely excited about her performance, but they couldn't help feeling overshadowed. Everything they had assumed about competitive archery, that experience mattered most, that confidence was essential, that physical strength provided an advantage, was being challenged by Maya's quiet dominance. As the final ends approached, Maya had built what seemed like an insurmountable lead. Her score was matching Amanda's nearly perfect performance, and she was showing no signs of fatigue or pressure. The gymnasium had grown quieter, with spectators and competitors alike watching to see if the unknown archer could maintain her incredible pace through the finish. Tank had grown increasingly frustrated and desperate. His scores had declined steadily throughout the competition, and Maya's consistency was making his own inconsistency more apparent. During the second-to-last end, he made one final attempt to rattle her. "Must be nice having beginner's luck," he said loudly as Maya drew her bow. Too bad it never lasts when it really matters. But Maya had moved beyond the reach of his words. She was shooting in a place of pure focus and instinct, where doubt and external pressure couldn't follow. Her arrow struck the center of the target with the same precision as all the others, and she barely registered Tank's comment. The final end of 6 arrows would determine the winner. Maya needed only a decent score to secure victory, while Amanda Pierce waited anxiously to see if her seemingly insurmountable total would hold up. As Maya prepared for her final shots, she thought briefly about how far she had come. 3 months ago, she had been the invisible girl who ate lunch alone and avoided attention at all costs. Now she stood on the verge of winning a regional championship and earning a full scholarship to one of the most prestigious colleges in the country. The transformation hadn't been about becoming someone different, it had been about discovering who she had always been underneath the quiet exterior. The girl who had always been underestimated was about to show everyone exactly what they had been missing all along. The gymnasium had fallen into an almost reverent silence as Maya prepared for her final end of 6 arrows. Word of her extraordinary performance had spread beyond the archery community. Students, teachers, and even people from the surrounding neighborhood had filtered into the bleachers to witness what might become a legendary upset. Maya stood at the shooting line, her equipment arranged with the same methodical precision she had maintained throughout the competition. Her bow felt like an extension of herself now, familiar and trustworthy. The target 70 meters away seemed larger and clearer than it had at the beginning of the day, as if her focus had sharpened her vision along with her shooting. The scoreboard told a story that few in attendance could have predicted that morning. Maya Chen, the unknown archer from Lincoln High's tiny program, was tied for first place with Amanda Pierce, last year's state champion from the prestigious Riverside Academy. Both shooters had 659 points out of a possible 660 through 12 ends. 6 arrows remained to determine who would claim the regional championship and the full scholarship to Preston College. Amanda stood behind the shooting line with her coach, a stern-faced woman who had guided 3 previous archers to state championships. They spoke in urgent whispers, discussing strategy for a situation Amanda had rarely faced, a genuine challenger who couldn't be intimidated or outpaced. "She's shooting like she's been doing this for years," Amanda's coach observed, studying Maya's form with professional interest. "Her technique is textbook, but, more importantly, she's not letting the pressure affect her mentally." Amanda nodded grimly. She had dominated youth archery in her region for 3 years, winning tournaments through a combination of exceptional skill and mental toughness. But Maya's calm consistency was unlike anything she had encountered. Where other competitors might crack under pressure or celebrate prematurely, Maya simply continued shooting with machine-like precision. Tank Morrison had long since been eliminated from contention, his scores deteriorating badly as frustration consumed his concentration. He stood with his team, watching Maya with a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. The little girl he had tried to intimidate was about to achieve something he had dreamed of for years. "How is she doing this?" he muttered to his coach. "She shoots like she doesn't even realize there's pressure." His coach, an older man who had seen plenty of young athletes let ego override performance, smiled slightly. "Maybe that's exactly why she's doing it. Sometimes the ones who don't think they belong are the ones who perform the best when they get their chance." Derek Martinez stood with the Lincoln High team, his emotions churning between pride and disbelief. For months, he had dismissed Maya as lucky, assuming that his athletic experience and competitive background would naturally make him the team's star. Watching her perform with such composure under circumstances that would have shattered his nerves was humbling in ways he hadn't expected. Jake felt similar confusion. He had been shooting archery longer than anyone else on the team, had studied techniques and equipment extensively, had even attended summer camps to improve his skills. Yet this quiet girl who had wandered into the program by accident was making his years of dedicated effort seem insignificant. Coach Henderson stood behind the team's seating area, trying to maintain his usual calm demeanor while his heart hammered with excitement and nerves. In 30 years of coaching, he had never had an archer reach this level of competition, let alone perform at this level. Maya wasn't just representing Lincoln High anymore, she was potentially about to upset the entire established order of youth archery in their region. The tournament director approached the shooting line as the final round prepared to begin. This was the moment that would determine not just the tournament champion, but potentially change the trajectory of a young woman's entire life. The scholarship to Preston College represented opportunity on a scale that Maya's working-class family could never have imagined. "Final end," the director announced through his microphone. 6 arrows to determine our regional champion." Maya stepped to the line and knocked her first arrow. The weight of the moment should have been crushing, hundreds of eyes watching, college scouts taking notes, her family's financial future potentially hanging in the balance. Instead, she felt the same calm focus that had sustained her throughout the competition. She thought briefly about her parents, probably still at work and unaware that their daughter was competing for a championship that could change their lives. She thought about all the times she had been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed as unremarkable. She thought about the quiet hours in the school's archery range, practicing alone while other students pursued more popular activities. The arrow flew true, striking the center of the target with a solid thud that echoed through the silent gymnasium. The crowd released a collective breath they hadn't realized they were holding. Amanda Pierce followed, shooting with the technical precision that had made her a state champion. Her arrow landed just millimeters from Maya's, maintaining the pressure with her own excellence. Maya's second arrow split the difference between her first shot and Amanda's, creating a tight cluster in the target's highest scoring ring. Her breathing remained steady, her form unchanged from the shots she had been making throughout the day. Amanda's second arrow matched Maya's precision, landing in the gold with the confidence of years of championship experience. The competition was becoming a showcase of archery at its finest, with both shooters performing at levels that would have been impressive at national tournaments. As Maya prepared her third arrow, she became aware of the absolute silence surrounding her. Even the usual background noise of a tournament, officials walking, equipment being adjusted, quiet conversations, had faded away. Every person in the gymnasium was focused on the battle being waged 70 meters from the shooting line. The sight picture aligned perfectly through Maya's bow sight. Her draw was smooth and controlled, her anchor point consistent with the thousands of practice shots that had prepared her for this moment. The release felt like silk, and she knew before the arrow completed its flight that it was perfect. The arrow struck dead center of the target's X-ring, the highest scoring area. The crowd erupted briefly before hushing again, recognizing that the drama was far from over. Amanda stepped to the line for her third shot, feeling pressure for the first time all day. Maya's consistency was rattling her usual confidence, forcing her to confront the possibility that this unknown archer might actually defeat her. Her shot was good, striking the gold ring, but not with the pinpoint accuracy she needed to maintain her edge. Maya's fourth arrow continued her pattern of perfection, clustering with her previous shots in a group that could be covered by a silver dollar. The gymnasium began to buzz with excitement as people realized they were witnessing something special, not just an upset victory, but a performance that would be remembered long after the tournament ended. Amanda's fourth shot showed the first real sign of pressure affecting her performance. The arrow caught the edge of the gold ring, still a high score but clearly below her usual standard. For the first time all day, her confident expression cracked slightly. Tank Morrison watched from the sidelines with growing amazement. "She's not even celebrating her shots," he observed. "She's shooting like this is just another practice session." His observation was accurate. While other competitors might pump their fists or show emotion after particularly good shots, Maya simply knocked her next arrow and continued her routine. Her focus never shifted from the process of shooting, never got caught up in the results or implications of her performance. Maya's fifth arrow maintained her standard of excellence, adding another perfect shot to her growing cluster. The mathematical reality was becoming clear: even if she shot poorly on her final arrow, Amanda would need a perfect shot to tie, and 2 perfect shots to win. Amanda stepped to the line for her fifth arrow knowing she needed perfection. The pressure of that realization affected her form slightly, causing her to rush her shot timing. The arrow flew high, catching the top edge of the gold ring for a lower score than she needed. A murmur ran through the crowd as people realized what was happening. The unknown archer from the tiny program was about to defeat the defending champion in decisive fashion. College scouts began scribbling notes more furiously, recognizing that they were witnessing the emergence of a potential star. Maya approached her final shot with the same methodical preparation she had used all day. She checked her equipment, adjusted her stance slightly, and knocked her last arrow. The gymnasium fell silent again, everyone understanding that they were about to witness the culmination of an extraordinary performance. As Maya drew her bow for the final time, she felt a sudden surge of emotion that threatened to break her concentration. The magnitude of what was happening, the championship, the scholarship, the validation of all her quiet hours of practice, washed over her briefly. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply and centering herself. When she opened them again, the familiar calm had returned. The target seemed to pull her arrow toward it, the sight picture aligning with effortless precision. The release was perfect. The arrow flew in a graceful arc that seemed to hang in the air longer than physics should have allowed, giving everyone in the gymnasium time to track its path toward the target. The arrow struck the exact center of the X-ring with a sharp crack that broke the silence. Maya had shot a perfect end, 6 arrows in the highest scoring area of the target, clustered so tightly they looked like a single impact point from the shooting line. The gymnasium exploded in cheers. Students from Lincoln High rushed toward the shooting line, while competitors and coaches from other schools applauded with the appreciation that comes from witnessing true excellence. Maya stood frozen for a moment, hardly able to believe what she had accomplished. Amanda Pierce approached her with genuine grace, extending her hand in congratulation. "That was the best shooting I've ever seen at this level," she said sincerely. "You earned this completely." The final scores confirmed what everyone had witnessed: Maya Chen, shooting for Lincoln High School in her first major tournament, had not only won the regional championship but had done so with a score that would have been competitive at the national level. Coach Henderson reached Maya first, pulling her into a bear hug that lifted her feet off the ground. "I knew you had it in you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But even I never imagined anything like this." Derek and Jake reached her next, their earlier resentment replaced by genuine admiration and team pride. Whatever complicated feelings they might have about being overshadowed, they recognized that they had just witnessed something special. "Maya," Derek said, shaking his head in amazement, "I owe you an apology. I never should have doubted you. That was incredible." The tournament director called for attention as the awards ceremony prepared to begin. Maya would receive not only the regional championship trophy but also confirmation of her full scholarship to Preston College. The girl who had started the day as an unknown underdog had transformed herself into a champion in front of everyone who had ever questioned her potential. As Maya stood waiting for the ceremony to begin, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she had been invisible, eating lunch alone and avoiding attention. The discovery of archery had changed everything, not by making her into someone different, but by giving her a way to show who she had always been. The quiet girl who had been dismissed and overlooked had just proven that sometimes the most dangerous competitors are the ones nobody sees coming. And this was only the beginning. The trophy felt heavier than Maya had expected when it was placed in her hands. As she stood on the makeshift podium in the center of the gymnasium, camera flashes popping and applause echoing off the walls, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. The girl who had spent most of her life trying to be invisible was now the center of attention for all the right reasons. The scholarship certificate from Preston College felt even more significant than the championship trophy. Dr. Sarah Williams, the college's archery coach who had driven 4 hours to scout the tournament, approached Maya during the ceremony with genuine excitement in her eyes. "Maya, I've been coaching at the college level for 15 years, and I've rarely seen raw talent like you displayed today," Dr. Williams said, shaking Maya's hand firmly. "Preston College would be honored to have you in our program. This scholarship covers full tuition, room and board, and equipment costs for 4 years." Maya stared at the certificate, her mind struggling to process the numbers. The scholarship was worth over $200,000, more money than her parents would earn in the next 5 years combined. It represented not just her education, but financial security for her entire family. "Thank you," Maya managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to say." Dr. Williams smiled warmly. "You don't need to say anything. Your shooting spoke volumes today. We'll be in touch soon about enrollment and training schedules." As the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Maya found herself surrounded by people she had never met before. Local newspaper reporters wanted interviews, other coaches expressed interest in training her, and several equipment sponsors approached with offers of endorsement deals. The attention was overwhelming for someone who had spent her life avoiding the spotlight, but Coach Henderson stayed close by, helping her navigate the sudden flood of interest. "This is just the beginning, Maya," he said quietly between interviews. "You've opened a door today that's going to lead to opportunities you can't even imagine yet." Derek and Jake helped Maya pack her equipment, both of them still processing what they had witnessed. The team dynamic that had existed just that morning, with Derek assuming he would be the star and Maya content to remain in the background, had been completely transformed. "Maya," Jake said as they walked toward the parking lot, "I need to apologize for the way I treated you these past few weeks. I was jealous of your improvement, and I said some things that weren't fair." Derek nodded in agreement. "Same here. I thought my experience in other sports automatically made me better, but you showed me that archery requires something different. Something you have naturally." Maya felt a flush of embarrassment at their apologies. "You don't need to apologize," she said. "You both worked just as hard as I did. I just got lucky today." "That wasn't luck," Derek said firmly. "That was skill and mental toughness under pressure. Don't sell yourself short." The ride home with Coach Henderson was quiet, both of them still processing the magnitude of what had occurred. Maya stared out the window at the familiar neighborhoods of her hometown, thinking about how everything looked the same but felt completely different now. "Coach," she said finally, What happens now? I mean, with the scholarship and everything? Coach Henderson glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Well, you'll finish high school here, of course. But you'll also start training at a higher level, preparing for college competition and, potentially, national tournaments. Preston College has one of the best archery programs in the country. You'll be competing against Olympic hopefuls. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Maya had gone from shooting alone during lunch to potentially competing at the highest levels of the sport in the span of a few months. It felt surreal, like something that was happening to someone else. When they reached Maya's house, Coach Henderson walked her to the door. "Maya," he said seriously, "today you proved that you have genuine championship potential. But success at the next level will require even more dedication and sacrifice. Are you ready for that?" Maya thought about her parents, probably still at work and unaware that their daughter had just won a scholarship that would change their lives. She thought about the dreams she had never allowed herself to have because they seemed impossible for someone from her background. "Yes," she said with quiet determination. "I'm ready." Inside the small house, Maya sat at the kitchen table with her trophy and scholarship certificate, waiting for her parents to come home. The silence felt different now, not the loneliness of being overlooked, but the calm of someone who had found her purpose. When her parents finally arrived, exhausted from their long work shifts, Maya's news initially seemed too incredible to believe. Her father, a man of few words who rarely showed emotion, stared at the scholarship certificate for several minutes before speaking. "This is real?" he asked in Mandarin. "A full scholarship to college?" Maya nodded, switching to Mandarin to explain everything that had happened. As the reality sank in, her mother began to cry, tears of joy and relief that their daughter would have opportunities they had only dreamed of. "We are so proud of you," her mother said, pulling Maya into a tight embrace. "You worked so hard, and you never gave up." That night, Maya lay in bed thinking about the path that had led her to this moment. 6 months ago, she had been just another quiet student who blended into the background. The discovery of archery hadn't changed who she was fundamentally, it had simply given her a way to express qualities she had always possessed. The following Monday at school, Maya found herself experiencing a new kind of attention. Word of her championship had spread through social media over the weekend, and students who had never noticed her before were suddenly interested in her story. The local newspaper had run a front-page article titled "Local Student Wins Regional Archery Championship," complete with a photo of Maya holding her trophy. Some of the attention was positive, classmates congratulated her in the hallways, and teachers mentioned her achievement during announcements. But some of it was uncomfortable, particularly from students who seemed to resent her sudden recognition. "Must be nice to get famous for shooting arrows," she overheard one girl comment sarcastically. "Anyone can do that." Maya had learned not to let such comments affect her, but they still stung. Success, she was discovering, could create its own challenges. The archery program at Lincoln High was transformed overnight. Principal Walsh, who had barely acknowledged the sport's existence before Maya's victory, suddenly took great interest in promoting the team. The school's athletic director discussed expanding the program and recruiting more students. "Maya's success shows what our students can achieve with the right support," Principal Walsh announced during a school assembly honoring her victory. "We're proud to have such a talented athlete representing Lincoln High." Maya sat on the stage during the assembly, feeling awkward about being singled out but understanding that her success might create opportunities for other students interested in archery. Coach Henderson had told her that 3 new students had already inquired about joining the program. The weeks following the championship brought a steady stream of new experiences. Maya began working with a private coach recommended by Dr. Williams, refining her technique for college-level competition. She attended her first national tournament as a spectator, watching Olympic hopefuls compete and beginning to understand the level of skill she would need to develop. Equipment sponsors sent her improved gear to test, transforming her basic setup into something that looked truly professional. The difference was noticeable immediately, her groupings became even tighter, and her scores climbed to levels she hadn't thought possible. But the most significant change was in how Maya saw herself. The girl who had once tried to disappear now carried herself with quiet confidence. She spoke up in classes, joined conversations with classmates, and began to take on leadership roles she had never considered before. Derek and Jake became genuine friends rather than just teammates, and the three of them formed the core of an increasingly competitive archery program. Derek's natural athleticism, combined with a new respect for the mental aspects of archery, made him a formidable competitor in his own right. Jake's technical knowledge and dedication finally began producing the results he had worked so hard to achieve. It's funny, Jake reflected one afternoon as they practiced together. I spent so much time trying to be the best archer on the team that I never realized the best thing about having Maya here was how much she would push all of us to improve. The relationship with her parents also evolved. Seeing their daughter's success had given them a new understanding of American opportunities they had never fully grasped before. They began attending her competitions, despite their work schedules, and started planning for a future they had never imagined possible. "You have shown us that our sacrifices were worthwhile," her father told her one evening. "Everything we have worked for was so that you could have chances we never had." As Maya's senior year progressed, college scouts from other universities began expressing interest, despite her commitment to Preston. The University of Alabama, known for its powerhouse archery program, sent a recruiter to watch her practice. Arizona State University, with its strong Olympic development program, made inquiries about her plans. "You've got options now," Dr. Williams told Maya during a phone conversation. "That's the position every young athlete dreams of being in." But Maya had already made her decision. Preston College had believed in her when she was an unknown, and Dr. Williams had treated her with respect and genuine interest from their first meeting. Loyalty mattered to Maya, and she intended to honor her commitment. The state championship tournament arrived in the spring, with Maya entering as one of the favorites despite her relative inexperience. The pressure was different this time. Instead of being an unknown underdog, she was expected to perform at a championship level. "How do you handle the pressure of expectations?" a reporter asked her during a pre-tournament interview. Maya thought carefully before answering. "I try to remember that my shooting doesn't change based on what other people expect. The target is the same distance, the techniques are the same. I just focus on doing what I've always done." It was a mature answer that reflected how much she had grown in the months since her first championship. The girl who had once been paralyzed by the thought of people watching her now understood that external pressure was only as powerful as she allowed it to be. The state championship became another showcase for Maya's remarkable consistency under pressure. She won decisively, setting a new state record in the process and cementing her reputation as one of the most promising young archers in the country. Standing on the podium for the second time, holding a state championship trophy that felt lighter than her first regional victory, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her there. The transformation hadn't been about becoming someone different, it had been about discovering who she had always been and finding the courage to show that person to the world. As her high school career came to an end, Maya Chen looked forward to the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead at Preston College. She had learned that being underestimated could be an advantage, that quiet strength was just as powerful as loud confidence, and that sometimes the person nobody expects to succeed is exactly the person who needs to. The girl who had once eaten lunch alone in empty classrooms was preparing to compete on some of the biggest stages in American archery. And she was ready for whatever came next, carrying with her the knowledge that she had earned her place there through talent, dedication, and the quiet determination of someone who refused to let others define her limits. Maya's story had become more than just an athletic success, it was proof that excellence can emerge from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most dangerous competitor is the one nobody sees coming. Her arrow had found its target, but, more importantly, she had found herself.